Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, and this is Transparency in Government. Today, my guest is Scott Laliberte from our school district. Welcome.
Thank you.
I know this seems like old hat. We've been doing this now for quite a while, but there's always new things coming up and always something to talk about. Most recently, we went through a heat wave.
We did.
Now, there's rumors that the governor wants all of us to start after Labor Day, and that might even, although the heat was after Labor Day as well as before, but so, you know, how do we let our folks know that to put air conditioning into these buildings would not be economically sound for the few days that we would need it?
That's the hard part.
Right.
That's the hard part. It's hard to justify what would easily be, you know, millions of dollars worth of improvements into the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system for a short period of time. We know it was uncomfortable. We did everything that we could to try to mitigate that. We did work with the fire department and with our health professionals to try to make sure that the measures that we put in place, make sure that our students were safe. But it was absolutely uncomfortable. I was out in the buildings. I was in all 6 of them at different points of the day of each of those days. And you know, I think our students handled it incredibly well. Our staff was great. We understood, I think people understood that this does happen sometimes in New England. We just tried to really do our homework and make sure that we weren't unsafe in any way.
So like snow days, we could have had a heat day.
Could have done that.
Some districts decided to keep their kids home.
A lot of the districts down in more urban areas did make that choice. I know that we did talk amongst a number of us, different superintendents in the area. We talked about that kind of thing, excuse me, but ultimately what we were told by people, and I spoke with our fire department, was fantastic in giving us insight into that, was that yes, it is going to be uncomfortable, but it's not going to be unsafe. So, you know, we did things like we moved recess where we did have recess outdoors. We moved it to the early morning where it was cooler. We do have some areas of the building, like the library and computer labs. Those are all those are air conditioned because of the nature of the equipment that's there. Those were available throughout the day to staff and to students. Staff could bring their students down and cool in those areas. We did have you know, extra water stations and whatnot, and fans that were working throughout the day. I don't think anyone's ever going to say it was an ideal situation, but ultimately when we evaluated the full picture, we didn't feel it was unsafe. We also made sure that we reached out to families that had students who might have been impacted adversely because of health conditions they may have had, and we said, ultimately, in New Hampshire, parents are the primary educator.
Sure.
If you feel like this in any way puts your child at risk, please absolutely keep them at home. There's no penalty for that.
Right, those were excused absences.
Correct.
For that
Correct. Yep.
reason.
Yep.
I'm wondering if anybody took advantage of it, though.
We did have some families that chose to do that. Yep.
No,
and
I
reached
mean
out to
children
us.
who took advantage of it, not
Oh,
parents.
children who took advantage of it. Oh, well, you know.
Oh, it's
we
too
trust the
hot.
parents, but you know, yeah. So
That's good.
yeah, it was an uncomfortable day, but I a couple of days, but it did bring up the whole discussion about school after Labor Day. And as I said, I received several calls on that. And one of the things that I said to people is we're open to discussing anything of that nature. And I know that the governor is putting together a task force to talk about it. We form our calendar, local control. We have that within the control of our school board.
Sure.
And I'm sure that'll be discussed.
And that is always decided upon in March, isn't it?
Yeah, we usually have a first draft out late January into February that we put out for feedback, and then the actual decision generally comes in March.
So if parents had any input, now would be the time to be talking to the school board.
It would be just fine for them to reach out to the board.
Right.
Yep.
Emails work great.
Emails are good. Yep.
Yep.
We can.
But we always like
Save
having
those.
people at the meetings.
That sure. Yes, we do.
Yes. Just you need to let somebody know that you want to come and speak, though, if you're at the meetings.
We do ask that people let us know
Yeah.
ahead of time because that allows us to adjust the agenda.
Right.
Right.
So how do you feel personally, though, about starting school after Labor Day, and still have an early, like June
Reasonable, yeah.
14th or 15th
Right.
exit time? I mean, what does that mean? What would it mean in order for us to be able to accomplish that? Because right now, we can't.
Right. I think it would be very difficult for us to start after Labor Day and still get out by what would be a reasonable time in June if we continue on a 180-day traditional calendar. Because it really doesn't leave a whole lot of room for snow days. On the average, we have 5 snow days a year on the average. So if you factor that in to a June 13th, June 14th finish date, we're going to be into the latter part of the month. So it's difficult to do that. From my standpoint, I think if we were to go to an hours-based system, that would certainly be a way to do that and maintain the integrity of what we're trying to do in the learning environment. And it's something that I've said to a lot of people as we've talked about creative scheduling options and different ways that we could go about accommodating all of those different needs. I think we have to take a look at it as something, as a problem that we need to align with our learning goals. I understand people, vacations get in the way, and in the spring you run into camps and that sort of thing. But really the qualifier on our end is let's make sure what we do as a district matches what we're trying to do in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you're looking though at hourly, right now if we took 180 days and multiplied that by 6, because the half hour is the lunch, right? How many hours do we go, and what's the different? What is our philosophy? How many hours do we feel as a district we need to go?
I don't know we've made a philosophical choice as far as the hours, the question of hours versus days. What we have done historically is we have relied upon the 180-day qualifier, which is fine. There are different standards for K through 6, or in our case K through 5 and 6 through 12. K through 5 is 945 hours. 6 through 12 is 990 hours. Right now, our elementary and middle school are fine. We're in good shape as far as that goes. We're over those required hours. Our high school is right at it. So if we were to try to make a transition to that, because we did have a conversation about the philosophical side and we were in support of that, we would have to be very careful about how we scheduled our high school, because we're right at that 990.
Right, and I'm sure, well, I don't know. I know right now there's a new program at the middle school, and so there's almost an extra period of the day, every single day, as opposed to 2 times a week before. And which takes that 2 or 3 minutes away from every single other period during the day.
Right.
And so were we to go to hourly, would we also consider lengthening our school day so that we can recoup those minutes? And also, if you take away 4 days, because that's generally what we go before Labor Day is 4 school days.
Right.
Would that add those 4 school days back in the hours? You know what I mean?
We would have to, we would have to, in all likelihood, lengthen the day.
Right.
Yep.
And that would mean all the way across the board, not just middle school, not just elementary school, but high school as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's many teachers who are like, go for it, because
Right.
we want to
Yeah.
be able to we're excited about the contents that we're trying to get across to these kiddos, and we always feel like it's just not enough time.
Right.
It's just
Right.
not enough time.
Yeah, the effectiveness piece, of time is another factor as well, and that's one of the things we heard a lot about. And I experienced that. I know as a former teacher, I experienced that as well.
Sure.
Of how effective is that instructional time when it's June 26th, or as it came up during the heat wave around Labor
Right.
Day. The kids are in there. It's 90 degrees in the classroom. What do how effective
Well,
is that?
fortunately,
So-
those were introductory days. Get to know your team, get to know
Right.
the routine,
Right.
those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So you weren't delving really deeply into content. You might have been
Exactly.
reviewing some things from the previous year. So, I mean, they weren't lost days, but they were,
I think staff did a nice job
Right.
making use of that time.
right.
Yeah.
And I think we would continue to do so no matter what. But it would be interesting to have until Labor Day off, you know, that extra time,
Right.
especially when we do get out so late in June, because of the snow.
Right.
But
Right.
you know, that's another discussion and something that's happening in the future, and
Yeah, I think that's
on the table.
Yeah, I think that will be discussed on an ongoing basis. You know, this fall as we get into budget season and then into our calendar discussions. I think it's going to come up again. I hear about that a lot from parents, and rightfully so. I think we should talk through different options and make a
Right.
good decision.
So any decision that's made, though, speaking of the budget, will affect the budget.
Could
Could
yeah.
affect the budget, I
Could,
should say.
Yeah, wouldn't
Yeah.
definitely, but
Yeah.
could.
The teachers are up for their contract renewal next year. So in March, the voters will be voting on the teacher contract. The school district has not put forth any bonds, however.
We have not.
No. So
have
the
not.
only thing that the school district will have on the ballot is that, of
In-
course,
in
their
all-
budget
yeah.
and,
In all likelihood, yeah, I mean, that's certainly a decision that I know the board will make as we go through
right,
budget
there may be warrant
season.
articles or something that would come
Certainly could
forward.
be, yeah, certainly
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah,
But as far as major, facilities and that sort of thing, as you know, we're in the middle of a process right now of studying, in particular, our elementary facilities in Moose Hill. But I think at this point, it would be premature for us to bring anything forward as far as a building project.
sure.
So, yeah, in all likelihood, that's what it'll look like this year.
But your goal is to have that report before the budget is finalized.
We will do an initial report at the second board meeting in October. And that will be a preliminary report where we will take a look at the concept, as we've discussed before, of functional capacity and how the capacity of a building will fluctuate based on how the space is used. What that's going to do is that's going to allow the board to have some real concrete evidence and real concrete facts to use to consider the different options. There are, 13, 14 different options of different things that we can do
Right.
as far as grade level configurations and programs moving to different other buildings. It's a pretty complex issue.
Sure.
That's part of the reason why we really wanted to bring together a group of staff members and some community members and put all of the different options on the table and give the board the tools that they need to consider those options and how best to move forward. But yeah, I don't think any of us are looking to push on that and hurry that process. It's more important that we make a good decision than a fast one.
Right,
Yep.
right. Speaking of good, not fast decisions, there's also the technology issues that are coming through.
Yep.
C3 just heard a presentation. I'm sure that's going to come before the school board as well. I'd be
Yep.
surprised if it wasn't.
Oh, it will.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the agenda for next week.
Yeah, it's
to
not
know if it,
on, it's
no?
not on next week. I know there's a second C3 meeting that will
Right.
be addressing that. I'm trying to remember the date, but it's the first one, the C3 meeting in October.
Right.
Will also address technology. We wanted to make sure that we had a chance to go through that first. Want to maintain some fidelity to the process and make
Right.
sure C3 has an opportunity to fully discuss those kind of things before we move them to the board. But I think it will also be important for us to make sure that the board has any outcome from that discussion prior to going into the budget
Right.
in December.
And I think that the C3 committee also wanted to make sure that the users in the building had the opportunity to weigh in on what they believed would be a
Right.
priority first,
Right.
beyond, there were lots of options that were given. And so I know that report, though, is on the website. So if people are interested in seeing that report, they should look on the website.
Yep.
But then, again, you're right, the next C3 meeting, we did ask to bring it back because we didn't feel as though it had enough opportunity to discuss
Yeah.
it.
A lot of what we're doing right now, particularly in the area of technology, is we're trying to do some long-range planning to sort of be able to articulate a vision for the connection between our instructional technology and what we're trying to achieve as far as learning goals go. I know we've talked on this program before about our desire really as a leadership team to kind of flip the script as far as the way people think about technology. Historically in education, we think device first. And it's okay, iPads, I remember when iPads came out, it was, you know, and it was, okay, we have this new tool, how do we use it?
Right, App City USA, and
Right.
you were overrun with apps and
Right.
had no idea what to, half of them just sat
Right.
there unused.
And it's where we really believe the right way at that is to flip that equation over and say, okay, here's an instructional problem. You know, I have a student who needs additional reinforcement and
Right.
audio-visual cues. What do you have for technology that will help me do that?
Right.
And by coming at it that way, we ask for what we need what we ask for, and everything is used appropriately in the
Right.
classroom. So I think this is another step forward in that kind of a process.
Right.
As you know, we've expanded greatly our use of Chromebooks because we found that a lot of laptops that we've been using, when you look at the way that they're actually deployed, they're deployed as web access devices, which a Chromebook is a much more efficient way to come at that.
And less
So
expensive.
Far less expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And you know, almost, well, certainly quicker as well. You know, I use Chromebooks with my students, and I know opening them up, they're right there, as opposed to booting up, logging in,
Right.
waiting. So it's you know, it's been a pleasure being able to use the Chromebooks. And
Laptop is a powerful tool, but
It is.
it's a tool that is used for a specific purpose. And
Right.
like you said, we really want to match up
right.
the tool with
And
the
we have
task.
found that, you know, I mean, on a limited basis, because we haven't inundated the middle school with Chromebooks, but on a limited basis, we've found that there are definitely times when you can use the Chromebook, which is a huge number of times, but there are still times when we need that laptop.
Right.
And so, you know, we wouldn't want to eliminate everything,
No,
but,
no.
so there's options. I mean, there's options, and
To
that's what you're
that
looking
point,
at.
what job am I trying
Right,
to do?
exactly.
And then what tool
Right.
what can I use to do that job?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want somebody, though, to invent the really fast one tool that I can use for every job.
I think there's a lot of people waiting for that.
Right. But I know one of the teachers uses the, well, kids bring in their own phones, but they also use the iPads for a game called Kahoot. And I have enjoyed watching the students play this game because they don't realize they're learning. It's almost like flashcards from when we were youngsters, and but it's interactive, it's fast, and they're competing against each other to try and get the correct answer, and it tells them right away whether or not they have the correct answer. So it's immediate feedback, and we know in the land of Sesame Street, everything has to be immediate feedback now, or their video games and everything else. It happens so quickly. But it can work very easily with a Chromebook as well, and which was exciting to find out because, we still are going to be able to use some of the things that we have been using with the new technology, which is nice.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was air quality. Somebody had asked me whether or not, while you are all doing this space needs assessment, whether you were also taking into account air quality. I know that was a huge issue at the district office, which was one of the things that pushed forward you moving. And, I couldn't be happier for you to be where you are now, because I know everyone's going to be healthier. There's space. You can have, I know I have to go to a professional development up there, so there's, opportunities for that, space for us to be able to do that. And for you to have parent meetings, so many important things that can happen now that you have the space and a healthy environment. What happens as far as the schools are concerned? Do you know?
I can give you the broad strokes. I know we do have air quality standards that we have to meet for our schools. We do have a policy for that, but we also have state standards that we have to meet. I know there's regular testing. I don't know a lot about how those tests are conducted or when, but I know Chuck Zappola, who's our building and grounds director, and truly one of the best in the business. His background is in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So we have a guy who works in that field, who's the leader of that team, who's an expert in the field. And we do have a lot of compliance testing that we have to meet. When we're working in schools, we actually have a higher standard in schools than we would have for us in the office.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know a lot about the technology because I'm a teacher by training, but I know listening to Chuck, we're in good hands.
Well, I've always felt that as far as Chuck is concerned as myself.
Yeah.
But going back to quality, I know that at Matthew Thornton there had been asbestos mitigation that was being done.
Yes.
Was that completed this summer? Is there still another section that needs to be
I
done?
believe it was completed at Matthew Thornton. There are some more smaller mitigations to be done across the district next summer. We're hoping to have that completed next summer. It's part of the reason when the warrant article was originally brought forward, it was introduced as a non-lapsing because we knew it would be a multi-year. It'd be a multi-year process, and obviously that's work that has to be completed by a company that has specific skills and equipment and training in that area. So what we do is just what we did at Matthew Thornton this summer. We get out of the way, and they go to work.
And they do their job.
Yeah.
I know that, in some of the schools, when we have heavy rain or when we have heavy snow, we have leaks.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that cause any mold though, or is there any concerns? And how, do they follow up and make sure?
It's always a concern when we have a leak, and that's something that I know Chuck and his crew are very careful about, making sure that doesn't happen, or if it does happen, that it's cleaned up immediately. They do check on a regular basis for that. I know time to time I've been contacted by parents who express concern over that. One of the things we're very fortunate about, a few years ago, there was a bond that was issued by approval of the voters. If memory serves me correct, I think it was before I got here, but it was a $4 million facility improvement bond. And a lot of the roofs in the district were repaired or replaced. And so our roofs are in pretty good shape. I do know anytime, obviously with the square footage that we're working with, there are leaks from time to time, and when they are, I know Chuck and his crew are right on top of it.
Yeah. And even people forgetting to close windows on heavy rain days too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've experienced floods because people have forgotten to put down the first floor window.
Did it in my kitchen the other day.
Oh.
Yeah. The heavy rain came in. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
I had a mess when I went home.
Yeah, I bet.
Yep.
So people should be looking forward to meetings about the space needs in October.
Yes. Yep.
Technology in October.
Yep. That could
Later
go
in
into
October or November.
Yeah.
The
depending on
middle
the
of
time.
November is when the budget gets, or that just before Thanksgiving, so that our school board has really good things to read over the holiday.
Yep.
Traditionally, when it comes out.
We hand it over usually at a meeting on Tuesday night of Thanksgiving week.
Right.
Yep.
And then comes those lovely Tuesday, Thursday weeks of meetings.
A lot of work.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Everything is sectioned out so that if somebody had an interest in coming because of the elementary school, or somebody had an interest in coming because of athletics or the band or whatever it happens to be, the music department, not necessarily the band, but the music department.
Yeah.
They can look on the agenda to see who it is,
Correct.
which part of the budget will be discussed
Correct.
to come.
Yep. We certainly encourage them to do that. If there was any question or lack of clarity around that, they can certainly give our office a call. We'll be glad to help them out.
I'm wondering also, I know we're just about out of time, but when it comes to space needs, and I know we're looking at the number of children and the type of needs that those children might have.
Right.
Are we also looking at the number of staff that we need to support those students? And will that be part of the budget, do you think, this coming year? Could there be changes?
Appropriate staffing is always part of our discussion And yeah, it's part of the budget, our budget process every year. We go
Right.
through our staffing levels. As we do the facility use report, as the initial report, like I said, is going to be an ongoing process, but when we do our report, as we've discussed before, we're looking at that whole idea of the relationship between programming and physical space. You know, where the term we're using is functional capacity.
Right.
So as a part of that, one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to be very upfront, very transparent about how things like class sizes and program capacity plays into that. Obviously, the district's standards for class size and staffing levels is something that would impact that greatly.
Right.
Our target for a primary class is 20 students or smaller. And our state guidelines are 25.
Right.
If you've ever had a birthday party with 25 7-year-olds, you understand what a challenge it might be to try to actually teach them something
Sure.
instead of just having a birthday party.
Right.
So that's part of the point that we're trying to make. You know, you could say, well, could you just make the classes a little bit bigger? That has an impact on the quality of programming. And we want to be very transparent about that,
Right.
very, very upfront with people. That's part of the reason that we make the decisions that we do, is because we understand our community has high expectations of us in our programming, and we want to maintain that.
So someone brought up the topic of the regular education aides that were used to be in the elementary, the early
Right.
grades. You
Yep.
know, each school was allotted a certain number of hours, and they could distribute those hours whichever grade level they wanted.
Right.
Would you anticipate, or could you imagine that ever coming back, or do you
Well,
feel?
From what I understand, a lot of that predated my time here, but from what I understand, I think that was all sort of unfolding when I first got here. But one of the things that I remember hearing was that the class sizes grew well beyond what we had hoped for and what we expected of our environment, to a point where late 90s, early 2000s, you had Matthew Thornton with over 30 students in an elementary class. From what I understand, those assistant positions were created to try to minimize the impact on the learning environment, because there were no classrooms.
Right.
The cafeteria had been turned into 3 classrooms. We're hoping that we can avoid that as we anticipate growing again. As you look around town, and between the turnover housing and the new housing coming in, we know we're going to have a lot more students in our schools in the near future.
Right.
So we're trying to come up with some creative ways to avoid that. But if we did, say, have a rush of students next year, and we had no choice because there was no physical space, that would certainly be something that we would consider doing again.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I really appreciate your time. I know it's you know, a busy season right now, opening and getting ready for everybody coming in with their budgets, because I know there's
Right.
a lot of preliminary work before you even present it to the school board.
Right.
So thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure. Glad to do it.
And we'll see you next month.
Sounds good.
And this has been Mary Wing Soares and Transparency in Government. Thank you for joining us.